Okay. So let me get rolling here. We are going to pick up where we left off with our Unity game. If you remember last class, we were reviewing some of this stuff for how movement works, where we update this input vector that gives us a vector 2 of really they give us an X and Y, but we use it as X and Z for applying a force to our rigid body. Since we don't want it to go up and down, we want it to go left, right, and then in and out for our 3D game. That's why we're using the Y coordinate for our arrow keys. With the Z coordinate for depth, moving in and out of the 3D space rather than up and down on the Y axis. All right, so 60 times per second, we are going to add a force to our rigid body. What force? It's going to be whatever the current direction that we are, the force currently is, and we have to give it to it as an X, Y, and Z force. So we do that as a vector 3. And then we give it whatever the current X is and whatever the current Y is for the Z coordinate, and then always a 0 for the current Y, because we're not asking the rigid body to jump up off the ground. If we wanted to go up in the air, we could give it a force of 1 or 2 or whatever, and then it would that's kind of like a jump a jump move. All right, and then we multiply that by whatever our speed is. And if you remember, we created our speed as a floating point number. We defaulted it to 10, but we made it public. That way it was accessible out here in Unity. If I click on player, which has that controller associated with it, we have our speed. So I'm going to go ahead and kick that back down to like a 20, which probably I still won't be able to drive well, but whatever, at some point maybe I'll put some walls up so I give me a kind of bumpers like kids at the bowling alley. Okay, so in any case, let's go back to our videos. All right, so we've already made our player move some. We scroll down and figure out where we left off. There's our applying the force. I think we've already fixed the movement speed for the player, but let's just look at this real quick.
Okay, you've almost finished setting up the player movement, but the speed isn't quite right. Let's go back to your script editor to fix that. First, let's add a speed variable to the script so that you...
Yeah, we've already done that. Okay, so next thing we're going to do, we'll mark all those complete and continue, is we're going to start giving ourselves things for us to bump into. Let's see. Not going to be this guy. Creating our collectibles. Okay, so if you remember the game, we have our ball that's going to be rolling around, but we want to be able to interact with other game objects on the screen, and we're going to do this through something called collisions. All right, so we're going to create our collectible game object. Hopefully it doesn't make me get too artistic.
Let's get started creating objects for the player to collect. In the hierarchy, select Add, 3D Object, Cube. Rename the cube Pickup. In the Transform component, use the vertical ellipsis to reset.
Oh, they have walls in theirs. When did they put walls in? All right, give me a second. Let me throw some walls in here. So we're going to move this onto the x-axis. I'm going to, this is just to keep, make it so that I can, I can play the game. All right, so I'm just going to create a couple of, let's just do it with some cubes. So I'm gonna, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, just to show you a little thing here, I'm gonna create an empty game object in here. I'm gonna call this guy walls. I'm gonna drop my walls into that. So I'm gonna just build one wall first, and I'm gonna look at it from the top. I'm gonna zoom out. Let's see, what's my ground width? So the scale is, oh, you know what? Let's just do this. So I'll switch it to the scale tool. That'll be good enough. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. So I'll just highlight it, hit Control C, paste it. So now I have two different walls. I'm just going to go ahead and place them. And I'm just kind of going to roughly do this. So it might not be perfect, but I'm just going to keep it in the play area if possible. All right. Then I'll go ahead and give myself another wall. Put it here, and I'm going to rotate it. What am I rotating on the Y? 90 degrees. So copy that. Drag these guys over here. Call that good enough. Let's make sure I have mumpy walls now. I may have needed to make those guys rigid bodies, but let's find out. Oh, don't hit the wall too hard. It couldn't contain me. Okay, give me a moment. Oh man, I'm terrible. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and scale up our wall height. And then we'll move these guys up. Okay, so let's see if we've Littman proofed this mousetrap now. All right. So now we're in our and I can tell that there's a lot of you laughing at me at this moment. So I guess maybe I'm happy that we're we're doing a little recording. And the reason I put this in this empty game object is I can now kind of, these walls are just kind of these placeholder dealy flippy thingies. So I could just kind of, minimize it. Now, what I am going to do is I am going to adjust our camera a little bit. I'm going to rotate here on the let's just call that good enough. All right, so we have a, oh man, I probably could get it going and ride up the wall and maybe maybe get out the water slide it. All right, let's call that okay. Okay for now. All right. So let's go back and we are now building our dudes.
Let the game objects transform to origin. Press F to focus the scene view camera on the pickup cube.
All right, just as a quick thing here, you basically just saw me do it. I'll show you the way that I do what they just did. I'll go ahead and add a cube like they did. So now we have a cube. I'm going to put its position at the origin. And then what I do is I just double click on it to zoom in on that guy, and that puts it at the center of the screen. This is kind of those skills that you end up getting. I'm not very good at it, and I'm on a laptop. I think I mentioned that if you're doing this a whole lot, getting a normal mouse allows you to kind of be a little bit more, gives you a lot more control over rotations and things like that rather than using the trackpad, but you can get away with it at the level where we're doing.
The player game object is currently overlapping the new cube. So select the Move tool and drag Pickup out of the way while you work on its functionality. The cube is currently buried in the plane, just like the player sphere was when you started this project. Remember that? The cube is also a regular shape, 1 by 1 by 1. So let's lift it up by half a unit so that it rests on top of the plane. In the transform component for the Pickup game object, set the position Y value to 0.5.
All right, so let me go ahead and rename mine Pickup like they did. All right, and then we'll put its position at 0.5. That way it's actually sitting on the floor. Let me kind of get above this here. And then maybe there we go. Call that decent. And then we'll move it away since right now it's kind of overlapping our player object. Okay.
This cube will be the collectible object in the game. To be effective, it needs to attract the attention of the player. So let's make the cube visually interesting. How about making it smaller? In the transform component, set each of the scale axis values to 0.5. This will give it the effect of floating above the play area.
All right, so under scale, 0.5. Now it is floating above the play area because we only lifted it up 0.5 and now we made it smaller than it was before. So now it's slightly elevated. Notice that because of where our light source is, we actually have a shadow. So it looks awesome, obviously.
That will help identify this object as special. But perhaps that's not enough. Let's tilt it too. Set each of the rotation axis values to 45. The cube also needs to stand out more against the background walls and the player game object. Let's change its color by creating another material. In the project window, find and select your first material, background. In the top menu, go to Edit, Duplicate. Rename the new material Pickup. With the Pickup material still selected in the project window, use the color picker in the inspector to change its base map color property. Let's make it yellow and use the RGB values 255, 200, and 0.
All right, and so we are going to ignore almost all of that. So, because we need to have way better colors than that. All right, so we now have it angled or whatever. Do whatever you want with that. If you don't want to just use the numbers, you can always come over here and use the rotation tool and kind of drag it the way you want so you think it looks cool. Whatever makes you happy. We'll go back to our assets here, go to materials. I don't have a background one. We must have skipped a video that dealt with the walls. But that's fine. It's not, we're not hurting anything. So I'm just gonna right click, hit create, find materials somewhere on here. I'm sure somebody would be yelling right now. It says, oh, you're there. Okay, there we go. And what did she say? Call it pickup. All right. And then we're going to select that, go to the, oh, hold on. Well, I can't go with pink. It's gotta. We're gonna go with a little chartreusey. Oh no, actually, that's the same color as the player. We don't want that. Yeah, let's go with like a sky blue. All right, and then we'll go ahead and just drag that onto our pickup. You could also select the pickup thing and drag it over here as by selected pickup. Notice that the material is now already over here, so you could have just drug it over to this guy. You could have also come over here, added a component. I think you can add a material, and then it would have shown up in the base level of your assets, and then you could have drug it into your materials. All right, but in any case, we have a pickup thing that's distinguishable from our the rest of our game map.
Now you can change the color of the pickup game object by changing its material on the mesh renderer component, or by dragging the material from the project window onto the cube in the scene view. Now it's starting to look more like a pickup, but it's still very static. One thing that attracts attention of a user is movement. In the next video, you'll write a script to rotate the cube.
All right, so making a guess here where they're going with this, but we're going to attach another controller script to this guy, and then probably use, fixed update or update, one of the two, that is going to have, apply a rotation to that dude, so that every single time there's a frame or 60 times a second, it's going to have this dude doing some stuff. So what we want to get out of this is this idea that, when we want one of our game objects to do something, we attach a script to it for its
let's
behavior.
get that cube rotating. As you've done before, select the pickup game object in the hierarchy, and then select Add Component, then New Script in the inspector. Call the new script Rotator. Then select Create and Add to confirm.
All right, and I'm going to do this slightly different. I'm going to go into Assets. I'm going to go into Scripts. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say Create C# script. Call this guy, what did she say? Rotator. Okay, and then I'm going to click on my pickup guy right here, and I'll drag Rotator onto. Why do I have two of them? I don't know why I have two of them, but I have one of them now. All right, and we'll go ahead and open up the code for our rotator dealy flippy thing here.
In the project window, move the rotator script to your scripts folder to keep things organized. And then open the script to edit it. Once it's opened in your script editor, remove the start function from the template. You won't be using forces to rotate the cube, so you can use update rather than using the fixed update function, so the rest is fine. Now, before you begin, let's think for a moment about what this script needs to do. It needs to make the pickup game object spin while the game is active. You have already set up the pickup game object's transform rotation property to 45, 45, and 45 for the X, Y, and Z axes. But these values don't change by themselves.
So depending on how they want us to ultimately rotate this, if we wanted to rotate around, we're going to choose the Y-axis, that up and down, to rotate it around. They might have us doing some tumbling stuff, but when you think about when you're rotating something, you want to think about the axis as kind of a bar, and you choose the axis that you're going to rotate something around based on the direction of the bar. So that's kind of where we're going with this.
And for the cube to spin, these values need to change every frame. To do this, you need to write a script that rotates the game object's transform. There are two main ways to affect the transform of a game object. These are translate and rotate. Translate moves the game object by its transform. Rotate rotates the game object by its transform. It has two possible initial parameters. One using a vector 3 variable, and the other using 3 float values for x, y, and z.
So remember, we talked about vector 3s as well as vector 2s. These are effectively like arrays. A vector 2 can hold 2 floating point numbers. A vector 3 can hold 3 floating point numbers. Traditionally, a vector 2 holds x and y coordinates. Traditionally, a vector 3 holds x, y, and z coordinates. But you should think about these guys as effectively convenient little pouches to hold 2 or 3 values. We just happen to use those values for locations, or in this case, a rotation among different axes. But try not to, a lot of times in, when as soon as you start hearing the words vector 2, vector 3, it starts sounding complicated. It's just a thing that holds 2 or 3 numbers. That's it. How you use it is the more interesting aspect of it.
The simplest option is the vector 3 parameter, which is all that's needed for this game. After the opening curly brace of the update function, add the following line of code. Transform dot rotate, open brackets, new vector 3, open brackets again, 15, 30, 45, then 2 closed brackets,
All right, so the transform, let me back up. I'm going to actually write this slightly different, but consistent with what you've seen me do before. So first of all, she said no setup is needed in here. Now, remember, this script is connected to a game object. Which game object? This game object. So we're going to take this game object's transform. And remember, the transform is this dealy flippy up here. Transform has a vector 3 position, a vector 3 rotation, and a vector 3 scale. All right, so we're going to set this guy's vector 3 rotation. Where's my code? So we're going to use a function called rotate. Now, what rotate does is it will act upon the rotation vector 3 of our transform using something called Euler angles. That's how you pronounce that, Euler. E-U-L-E-R-S. He's a mathy guy, mathematician dude. Okay. And what is she having us do? 15, 30, 45. So she's applying 15 degrees rotation around the X. 30 degrees. It's actually, these actually are not degrees. These are actually rotate might take in degrees. In Unity, the measurement for rotation is something called quaternions, which again is a mathy thing. Rotate, it looks like these are taking in degrees, 15, 30, and 45. So that way we don't have to think in terms of quaternions. It's doing the magic math stuff behind the scenes to make it work. If my recollection is correct, quaternions, besides being a scary, smart sounding word, there's an efficiency benefit of doing quaternion based math for this kind of stuff. So games use it because it technically is mathematically faster. All right, 15, 30, 45. So this is going to be a new vector 3. 15, 30, 45. All right, so there's our new vector 3. If you wanted to, you could have put that in a variable first and then tossed it in here, but because technically this is creating a brand new vector 3 every single time through update, I'm not sure that is a great idea. I would maybe do something like private vector 3 rotation vector. Set that guy equal to that. Let's make that a private variable up top. And then I'll use my rotation vector inside there. That way we're only defining it one time. Chances are it would have, when it compiled it, it probably would have made it, fixed it for us behind the scenes at the assembly level. But this is better programming practice to say, hey, I only need this variable once, and I'm just going to keep applying it over and over and over again.
Semicolon. Make sure that transform is a lowercase t, because you're referring to the component, not the variable type. This action also needs to be smooth and frame rate independent. To do this, multiply the vector 3 value by time.delta time before the closing parentheses.
So what's happening in here is delta time is the amount of time that has passed since the last call to update. This allows us to have a smooth rotation along this 15, 30, 45 rotation vector, let's say, independent of frame rate. You know, so if I'm on a computer that is running at 200 frames a second and you're on a computer that's running at 100 frames per second, this will feel smooth on both of them as long as it's at least probably 30 frames a second. It'll probably look smooth to the human being, but it'll rotate at the same rate on both of ours because it's adjusting the math for the amount of time that's happened between frames.
Delta time is perfect for ensuring actions happen smoothly, because delta time is a float representing the difference in seconds since the last frame update occurred. It will dynamically change its value based on the length of a frame. Okay, that's all you need. Save this script and return to Unity.
So let's go back here. Save our script here. When we go back to Unity, we should see it's compiling the scripts. Maybe already did it when I saved it the first time. And we'll go ahead and hit play. And oh, now it just compiled it there. And you see the dude is now spinning all awesome like. And maybe we actually do want to drop the camera down. Oh, we're just going to call that good. All right, so we got some spin on it now.
Let's enter play mode and test the script. Excellent. The pickup game object rotates. Exit play mode when you're done testing. Remember to save your Unity project frequently. Now's a great time to do that. Now you've made a beautifully rotating.
All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and save. All right, now I'm guessing where she's going to go next is we've effectively created our pickups. We're probably going to be adding some more logic to it inside of pickup to detect collisions, unless we add that to the player. We're going to be looking at something called a prefab, where we've designed our pickup thing one time, and now we want it to be so we can duplicate it a whole bunch of times easily, as opposed to just making copies of it here. Using a prefab allows us to have something come from the same source, and then if we make changes to it later, we can apply those changes to all versions of that easily, rather than having to go through every copy and making a change.
Selective object, but there's only one. In the next video, you'll learn how to turn the pickup game object into a prefab and add lots of collectible objects to the play area.
Okay.
Now you've created one rotating pickup collectible, it's time to place them around the play area. There's one vital step needed to do this. You need to make the pickup game object into a prefab. A prefab is an asset that contains a template or a blueprint of a game object or game objects family. Once a game object is turned into a prefab, you can use the prefab in any scene in your current project. By turning the pickup game object into a prefab, you will be able to make changes to a single instance of the prefab or to the prefab asset itself. And all of the pickup game objects in the game will be updated with those changes. So let's get started. First, go to the project window and check that you're at the root or top level of the project. Make sure that no other item or directory is highlighted. Select Create, Folder, and rename this folder Prefabs. Now, select the pickup game object in the hierarchy and drag it into the Prefabs folder. When you drag an item from the hierarchy into the project window, Unity creates a new prefab asset.
All right, so we go into assets. And again, this is just for human organizations. So you can name these things whatever you want, but naming convention says we're going to call this guy prefabs. And then we're going to go ahead and drag our pickup into there. And now this has been generated as a prefab asset. So now if we want to add multiples, and notice how he's changed up here as well. So any changes we make to this original will stick with the all copies of it, unless we otherwise make a change to an individual one. And if you think about games like Mario, Super Mario Brothers, where, you know, all the turtle guys all act the same, they're probably a prefab, or would be a prefab today. This, you know, those were made way before game engines existed. But those would be a prefab, and they all behave the same way. And sometimes what you'll have is you'll have like bosses at the end of levels that are sometimes like bigger versions of something in the level, might have some of the same behaviors, but then they do some extra stuff. They may have started off as the prefab, but then they distinguished themselves, kind of like inheritance, by making changes only to the prefab aspect of that, not to or making changes only to that instance of the prefab rather than the core prefab.
Containing a template or a blueprint of the game object or game object family. Your game object will turn blue in the hierarchy when it becomes a prefab instance. Select the arrow to the right of the pickup prefab in the hierarchy to open the prefab edit mode. From this mode, you can use the arrow at the top of the hierarchy to return to a normal scene view. Now you've turned the pickup game object into a prefab. In the next video, you'll instantiate it around the play area for your players to collect.
Right, just to show that, I'm going to go ahead and drag some more of these guys out here. Let's give ourselves 5 of them or so. I'm going to go ahead and click the player, center ourselves in the player, look straight down on it, scroll out some. And now we're just going to position these dudes. Oh, hold on. I don't like that you rotated it like that. Okay, well, what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take all those. Now, we'll just do this, and this, and this. And we'll just make sure the Y is at a 0.5. Oh, but I just did that for all of them. Five. Five, because of the way I'm dragging it, it's, they're already angled. So it's like I'm pushing it up a hill. That's why they're going up into the air so much. And I'm sure that they are going to have a much better little circle than I'm having here. Okay, so clearly those are in a perfect circle, all equidistant from each other. So, but if we go ahead and hit play, we'll see that they all match the same script behavior. They're all spinning and stuff. Now, if I do make a change, for example, if I come into my code and let's just do like ×5, delta time ×5, they'll spin faster. Save that, go back to Unity. I go ahead and run this, we'll see that that new rotation speed applies to all of the guys because I made a change at the prefab level. I actually think that looks better. So I'm going to leave it like that because it's awesome. Okay. So we already added some more. Let's see if she did something fancy schmancy to.
Okay, let's fill the play area with rotating pickup objects. Before you start, let's keep things organized. In the hierarchy, create a new game object and call it Pickup Parent. In the inspector, right-click the transform component title and select Reset to reset Pickup Parent to origin. Then, in the hierarchy, drag the Pickup game object onto Pickup Parent. Next, make sure that you have the child pickup game object selected in the hierarchy, not the parent. Select the gizmo in the upper right of the scene view to switch to a top-down view. Now, use your scroll wheel to zoom out a little so you can see the entire play area. Okay, let's start placing pickup objects. Move the first pickup game object somewhere you like. Next, let's duplicate the game object. Make sure it's selected and then go to Edit, Duplicate. You can use the hotkeys Control-D for Windows or Command-D for macOS. Now place the second instance of the prefab. Using the hotkeys, create some more pickup game objects and place them around the play area. About 12 is a good number for this game. To make this easier, you can move parallel to the ground or XZ plane by selecting the XZ plane at the center of the gizmo. Okay, that's 12. At the moment, the collectible objects are present in the game, but the player can't actually collect them. That functionality is the next thing you're going to add.
Okay, so she may have placed hers a little bit better than I did, but we're going to call mine awesome. All right. Ooh, I earned some XP. All right, so now we're going to be detecting collisions with collectibles. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to pick up at this point on Friday. For homework, I want everybody to get their code up to the current level where things are rotating. It's on the screen. If you want to make yours look just like hers, that's fine. If you want to make it look better so it's more like mine, you can do that as well. And what I want you to do is, I haven't shown you how to do GitHub to put a Unity project online, but what I want you to do is just kind of a side skill that would be helpful to have, is I want you to take a about a 30-second 15 to 30-second video of your game playing. So do a screen capture and upload it to YouTube. You can make it private if you want, and then give me a link to your video, your 15 to 30-second video as your submission for the assignment, so I can watch your game move to see that everybody is has a current working game. Make sure you use the self-evaluation to tell me if something wasn't working or whatever, and then we can set up a time or before class next week, take a look at your code and see what's going on. Okay, so I would say questions, comments, concerns, bribes, but I don't have any audience. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to go ahead and get this video uploaded. So you will have it available for class time here in about 20 minutes. I will jump on to Zoom at the beginning of class, at least, for people who didn't read the Slack message, and hopefully you'll be able to hear me well enough that I can explain to go to watch the video. But if not, I'll put it in chat as well. Remember, Friday's class is also going to be on Zoom, but next week we'll be back in person. Okay, I will see everybody on Friday, or some of you soon, maybe.